Happy Archives Month, everyone, and happy Electronic Records Day, too. My name is Gina Vergara Bautista. I'm the Records Management Supervisor at Hawaii State Archives. Thank you so much for joining us today for Social Media Archiving is Achievable with Dr. Adam Jansen. Before we start our presentation, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping rules or housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded, so you can view it again later on. Second, at the end of the presentation, there will actually be a question and answer session. You're welcome to enter your questions at any time during the presentation when you click on the Q&A button. And please don't forget to send the message itself. Now, let me introduce to you our speaker, Dr. Adam Jansen. Dr. Adam Jansen is the state archivist. He administers the public archives, the records management, and digital archives programs and facilities. Prior to joining Hawaii State Archives, he was a consultant, and before that, he was actually the Deputy State Archivist managing digital archives at Washington State. I give to you now, Dr. Adam Jansen.
Aloha mai kako. I am so very pleased and surprised at how many of you signed up to learn all about social media archiving. And I think it's really relevant given the news lately. Facebook has really been up there, particularly their outages. And as we move forward, I'm going to assume that most of you have some type of oversight into archiving records for some type of organization, community group, business, or even yourself. To me, the important thing is we post social media because it's important, and somebody somewhere has to make sure that this media that we post outlives us, outlives, the very tenuous nature of social media to exist for generations.
Adam, you're on mute. You're still on mute. Try it again. What's happening?
I can't unmute. Can you unmute me, Gina?
You're on mute now. Keep going.
Oh, I'm not mute. Okay, there we go. Okay, so can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I can't hear you on my headphones. I can only hear you through my laptop. So I want you all to know we did a test run of this. Everything worked perfectly. Now we're having difficulties, but as long as you can hear me, I'll keep going. So aloha mai kako. I am so very pleased to see how many of you wanted to come today on what is the extension of Electronic Records Day, which should have been on 10/10. For those of you who are nerds like me, that's 1010, binary language. It's funny. But we're celebrating today to talk about social media because the records we're putting out on social media are increasingly becoming more important. And as such, they really are worthy of preservation so that future generations can benefit from all the things that we are posting today. So in order to preserve a thing, I think it's very important to understand a thing. So I found this definition of social media that really resonated with me because I think it encapsulates really the essence of what it is. And so social media is a computer-based technology that facilitates the sharing of ideas, thoughts, and information through the building of virtual networks and communities. And it's that sharing concept. The whole point of putting things out on social media is to share them with a broad audience, as wide as possible, without having to know these individuals to allow them to choose to get this communication from you, your organization. And by design, social media, it's internet-based, and gives users quick electronic communication of content, because it's become such an integral part of our lives. You know, we're constantly checking our social media feeds throughout the day. And so this is a way that we can get our intrusion and get our message out to our stakeholders in a very real time scenario, that we can reach thousands, tens of thousands of people very quickly with the push of a button.
Adam, you are mute again.
I swear to goodness, I'm not doing anything. It's
Okay.
just not liking us today. So the typical types of social media include, in state government, very popular Facebook, followed by Twitter, Instagram, Flickr, YouTube, and Vimeo, kind of in that ranking order as far as how state government uses these social media platforms. See if I can forward without it muting me again. There we go. And again, we need to define a thing. When we're talking about archiving social media, digital archiving, my definition for that means protecting machine readable records of enduring legal, fiscal, or historical value from loss, alteration, deterioration, and technological obsolescence in a system independent from that which produced it. We don't want to leave these valuable records in the social media platforms, because those are controlled by these third parties. They could change their service level agreement, they can change their pricing schema, they can change the structure so that we're only going to keep 10 years, and after that you have to pay a lot, or we're just going to destroy it. It's important to us to be able to have that information under our control so that we know it can continue to exist. And within a business framework, why is archiving social media important? Well, it's increasingly becoming the primary method that businesses, whether they're profit, nonprofit, governmental, educational, that's how we communicate with our customers, whoever that target group is. And as such, social media posts are really becoming the equivalent of records today. We've been preserving, archiving records, pardon me, for generations. So now we have to tackle this digital method. And again, definitionally, records are any document with fixed form and content that is made or received in the usual and ordinary course of a practical activity and set aside as evidence of that activity. And so these social media posts are made in the course of our business activity, and they're meant as evidence to say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is important to you. And as such, as records, particularly from a governmental framework, those are permanent records. Legally, we have to preserve those records forever, because in our analysis, social media posts fall under public relation files, either the major type of public relations, which are prepared statements or announcements meant for distribution to news media, such as the adoption of new programs, termination of old programs, major shifts in policy, and changes in senior personnel, or the kind of the small kind public relations, scrapbooks, photos, articles, program notes, documentation of events sponsored or funded by an agency. So all these photos that we're posting, all these news announcements that we're posting, they really fall into this general description. And as such, the retention is forever. And from a governmental perspective, when we're talking social media sites, this is ehawaii.gov, the listing of some of the major social media. And if you look in the upper right, there are 344 different social media sites listed just on this one page. And we know for a fact this isn't even half of what's out there. You know, we go to the legislative website, and there's the equivalency for senators and our House of Representatives, and UH has a whole big list. The counties have a whole big list. The agencies don't have all of their divisions and branches listed on here. So we know that this is only the tip of the iceberg, yet 344 is still a lot. Just to give you an idea, we currently have over 500 social media sites that we're tracking and preserving, downloading ourselves. And so what have we done to date? We started this initiative about a year and a half ago. We've downloaded over 90,000 tweets, totaling about 63 gig in space. In Flickr, we've downloaded 150,000 images, totaling 600 gig in space. Instagram's been another almost 200,000 images. And the important thing is only 84 gig in space. So compare that to Flickr, which has, only 75% of the images, but, over 5 times the number of file size. And so you can see that the Flickr has a much higher fidelity images that we really want to try and capture, because they're going to be the original resolution from the cameras, as opposed to the downgraded versions that we see in Twitter and Instagram. We're still active in doing YouTube and Vimeo, but we've already got about 3,500 videos totaling 70 gig. And as you can see, Facebook's still kind of the big zero. We're still doing the research on that. That is the one nut that we have yet to crack, that we haven't found any good open source tools that allow us externally to go in and grab people's Facebook pages. We're researching through the Facebook API to see if there's something we can do behind the scenes, but that will require the administrator of that Facebook page to grant us a special key to be able to download it. So stay tuned on that. So that's kind of the why. And to show that it can be done, I'm going to show you the tools that we're using, and you can see how effective they are, how easy they are to use. And the thing to keep in mind, as the state archives, we have no money. We don't have funds to be able to dedicate to this, which is why we've had to research this ourselves. We can't hire a third party to do this for us. I wouldn't hire a third party to do this for us, but even if we would, it's not an option. So the most we spent on any one of these tools is a $40 perpetual licensing to be able to use it on multiple workstations. So everything you're about to see is $40 or less. And so it's very easily implementable at any size organization with relatively little IT support. So the first tool that we're going to talk about is Twitter. I think this is a really slick tool. It's very easy. It's a great way to capture all of these tweets that are going out. And as you can see, it's a Chrome plugin. So as long as you're using the Chrome browser, this is freely available to you. And so here's the web page of what it looks like. The documentation is partially in Japanese, so the developer is most likely Japanese, so don't be surprised when you see that. This is indeed the tool that we use, and we think it's quite effective. So when you download the plugin and install the extension in your Chrome browser, what you see is when you load up a Twitter page, you will see right above the major banner, just to the right of where it says Governor David Ige 11.8K tweets, you see that there's a blue media with a down arrow and a like with a down arrow. It installs this capability now on every single Twitter page that you see. So when you click that media download button, you're presented with a dialog box. And what that basically allows you to do is say, I want to download all the tweets between particular time frames. If you want to do all the tweets to the beginning of time, you leave the start date blank, you leave the end date blank, and it's just going to do everything. And you have the options of, I want to download just tweets that don't have any attachments. I want to download tweets that have images. I want to download tweets that have images or video. I want to download retweets. And so it gives you a little bit of flexibility in order to make sure that you're getting what it is that you want to do. So it's very quick, simple. You put in your start date, your end date, you select which types of tweets you want to download, and then you hit start. And as you hit start, you can actually see it starting to crawl the sites, starting at the date you established and working forward. And because of space limitations, it cuts off at about 500 meg, and then it'll zip up all of those files and then continue on to create a new zip. We've downloaded some incredibly large Twitter accounts, and Maisie Hirano is one of the most difficult because she loves retweeting videos. And so some of the largest file sizes is her site. And so it took, I think, 8 or 10 individual download packages to crawl her entire Twitter site. So when you're all done, you get a zip file, and this is what it looks like. You open it up, And you can see that the first bunch of the little, if those of you who know what IrfanView is, that's their icon. Those are all the pictures that were attached. And then you see the break. It gives you both an Excel spreadsheet as well as an XML file of all the metadata that's associated with these images. And to me, that's the power. It's not just downloading the original tweet, but as we dig into it a little bit more, you can see that it's giving you what date and time was the tweet sent out, which can be very important from a policy legal perspective. Whose account it was, what Twitter handle they were using, what was the URL for that individual tweet. So you can always go back to see, is it still on Twitter and does it match what I have? It tells you whether there's a type of media, whether it's an image or a video file, and what the file was saved as. So now you can start to go back, take that line of data out of your Excel spreadsheet and associate it back to the original media that was attached to it. And then you can also see on the right-hand side, what did the tweet say? How many replies did it receive? How many retweets did it have? And how many people liked it? The one shortcoming that we have of this tool is you don't have the ability to save all of the replies that were done to this tweet. And so because of that, our recommendation and our internal social media policy is that we don't engage in discussions on social media. As long as we send it out, it's a news release. Once we start to dive into that retweet or that comment and comment back, now we start to engage in correspondence. And so that has a different retention level that we don't have the tools to save. So we don't classify the replies as correspondence if we don't engage. So, you'll have to make your own decisions based on the tools, but for us, and we recommend that social media, you do not reply. You have a policy that says, if you want to engage with us, here is our email. Here is our official communication channels. So that's Twitter. It's worked really well. It's been very easy. You have to do it account by account, but it captures a lot of that information that you want to save. So moving on to Flickr, we use a tool called Bulker, and this is one of those Bulker Pro is what we use so that we can have more capability, faster downloads, more verbose metadata. And I think this is about either $30 or $40 for a perpetual license. And when you install it, you're presented with a screen with a bunch of options. If you click on the user button at the top next to search, you can enter in the Flickr handle page that you want to download. So you enter it in, you hit the browse button next to it. And what it does is it goes into that Flickr page and it starts to bring everything back for you. So you can see along the left-hand column, those are all the Flickr albums that are created, including the full title of that Flickr album that was created. And then all of the images that are associated with, at this level, the entire account. Or if you click on any one of the albums, all of the photos that are associated just to that album. And then you can see that there is a download button at the very bottom. And so it allows you to choose how and what do you want to download. Do you want to download the original sized image? Or if space is a concern for you, you can choose large, medium, or small versions of those images, which is one of the functions that Flickr does provide to you. You also have the ability to download and embed the EXIF data into the images themselves. And that is the information that is pulled off of the camera at time of capture. So if your camera's properly configured, that can give you things as the exact second that the photo was taken, what was your f-stop, what was your shutter speed, what type of lens, what type of camera. So it's important type of information to help authenticate that image as being taken by your official staff photographer, for instance. Pardon me. You click the start download and then it just starts to run and go through it. And what it does is it downloads all of that information as a single bundle. So what we do is we actually will download one album at a time so that we can have distinct separations as it was originally filed, if you would, on the Flickr website, so that each album has a unique corresponding folder in our hierarchy structure on the drive. But as you can see, we just sequentially number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that doesn't tell us much. So outside of the bulker tool, and as we look into one of those folders, you can see here's all of the photos. Again, that's a little red cat icons. And then underneath it is a text file with all of the metadata that's associated with that particular image. And what that looks like is here. And so you can see it has the info of who is the photographer, what was the URL of the image, what type of license was ascribed to that, what type of Creative Commons, is it protected, are rights restricted, is it open copyright, and what have you. The date that the photo was taken, the date it was uploaded, the title of the photo, and any description of the photo. So this is my chance to push back a little bit for anybody who is in charge of their Flickr site for their institution. So many of these photos that we receive have no metadata associated with them, and that's a problem, because if we don't get that at point of creation, there's no way we're going to be able to replicate that 10, 20, 30 years from now. Why? Who? What was the significance? So, my kind of ask to all of you is think about posterity. If we're posting this on Flickr, we're posting this on Twitter, we're posting it because we want people to know, to share. So, add just a little bit of extra more description so that those who were not at the event, who don't have the context, the knowledge, the experience that you do, will be able to gain more benefit from those photos down the line. So again, as I started going down the road, because it doesn't natively embed the downloads into the event album name, what we do is in an Excel spreadsheet, we have those sequential numbers that we ascribe, and then we copy paste the album title off of the Flickr page into the event title column here. And then we also kind of look at the date span of the images so that we have a start date, end date, and whose account it was off of, because this is the index information that we will make available to our researchers so that they can kind of limit their searches on what information they're looking for, keyword searches or date ranges. So that's Flickr. Instagram, oh, I love this tool. This tool is absolutely awesome. So it's called 4K Stogram. It's another commercial product. This was a $30 perpetual license to be able to do it. But the advantage of this is you subscribe to Instagram pages. And so once you load them up, every time you open the program, it refreshes and says, is there anything new since the last time I did this? So this is by far the most hands-off of the tools. Once you set it up, you just let it run, and it works really well. And so we've got, I think I've subscribed now to a little over 100 different Instagram sites of government business that we're downloading, and it makes it just a very, very simple tool, and it gives you thumbnails. And as you can see here, these are all the Instagram sites that we utilize, and it automatically creates a folder under the Instagram handle. So whatever the title of that page is, that's what the folder is saved as. And so when you go into it, as you can see, here is all of the images that were posted on Instagram, and they're labeled with the date and time that they were posted to the Instagram site. That's great, but that's just the images, and the renumbering doesn't help a lot because it doesn't tell us a whole bunch. One thing to note at the bottom is increasingly stories and highlights are functions in Instagram that are available. Not too many people use them yet, but it will download stories and it will download those highlights as separate functional things so that you can have those preserved as well. And then the last folder you can see are thumbnails. So it also includes thumbnails of these images in case they're longer or if they're video. But if you go back into your subscription page, under the More section, you can say export posts. And this is the power of the system. The one place where it's kind of manual because you have to do this you have to do this by each Instagram handle and download it individually. But when you do, you can see it gets more verbose in the type of information that you have. So that you have the file path to the actual image itself, but then you also get whatever caption was associated with that Instagram page. So in my experience, most posters are good about captioning their Instagram pages. Most posters are very, very poor about captioning their Flickr pages. So we need to take what we're doing in Instagram and apply it to Flickr for posterity. Otherwise, 50 years from now, I'm going to have a bunch of people standing around a table and absolutely no idea why these people were standing around the table and not even know who they were. So why keep the photo if we don't understand any of the context or the players or the event, the who, what, where, when, whys. So take what you're doing here, apply it to Flickr. And then again, very similar to our Twitter, it gives you a link to the original Instagram post so that you can always go back to Instagram and compare what you have versus what they have. So pretty slick, pretty easy to use, and relatively hands-off. So the last aspect of social media archiving that we're conquering at this point is both Vimeo and YouTube. And fortunately, they both work with the same tool. Now, this tool is the only one that is not WYSIWYG, not what you see is what you get. There's not a visual component to this that allows you to drag, drop, click buttons. This is all command line scripting. So this is the one that requires a little bit more technological savvy. It's still achievable, but if you're not comfortable navigating around batch files and command line, you're going to need a little bit of help doing this. Because what it is it's a bunch of files and scripts that you save into a single folder. And as you can see here, the main drivers are ffmpeg, ffplay, and ffprobe, and YouTube download.exe. Those are the actual executable files that allow us to download captions, metadata, the video files, and create JPEGs for all of these things using those 4 tools. The nice thing about it, while it is command line scripting, the very last file that you see is called YouTube link.txt. In this, you put all of the YouTube and Vimeo channels, pages, users that you want to download the content for, and it starts at the top, crawls that entire link and everything below it and downloads it, then moves to the next link and downloads it and moves to the next link. So you set this up as a huge job with a really big hard drive. You click go and you come back weeks or months later as it crawls that site, and it just keeps plugging away and plugging away and plugging away. And again, command line scripting, but it tells you I'm working on this and I'm 10% done at this rate. Oh, I had an error at this sector number, going to retry. And it's got some good error handling, because the one thing you're going to see is network traffic is not the most robust thing. And so having some type of validation, I couldn't download it the first time, so I'm going to try again and pick up where I left off, is an important aspect to that. That's the difference between success and failure, so that just because one packet was dropped doesn't mean that you just junked the whole thing. So it does have, I think, really robust error handling capability, so that it keeps trying up to 10 times. And our success rate has been very, very high of being able to grab this stuff on the first try. And when you're successful, this is what you get in return. So it does save it in a folder structure by whatever account it is. And so you'll see here that, again, it renames it on the date, and whatever the title was given to that YouTube or Vimeo. But then it also includes some JSON, which is some formatted code that you can use, as well as a command, or a text-based description. JSON can be read using an XML browser. And so it has all of that technical metadata information that goes with it. And of all the tools, this one really gets into the weeds on the technical metadata. It will tell you all about the bit rate and the audio frequency, what compression method it's using, what the file size is, pixels X by pixels Y. So it gives you a lot of the really technical metadata that could be very useful in the future when it comes time to reformat these video formats when the current file format becomes obsolete, when MP4 is no longer being used because we're on MP12. And so it's valuable information to have. It's not anything that most users will ever use. So the last piece that I want to talk about that we're doing, it's not really social media, but it is on the social media page, and it does definitely fit under public relation files. And that has to do with news feeds, RSS, real subscription services. And this is really targeted towards news consumption, towards news organizations. The difficulty is, if any of you are familiar with RSS feeds, they're fed as formatted XML, and they tend to only keep the most 10 current news headlines at a time, which means as something new comes out, the oldest thing drops off the list. So if we don't start capturing this now, by the time we start archiving, we will only have the previous day or week or month or year's worth of news available to us. Our experience has been all of these other tools that we've used, as far as Twitter and Flickr and Vimeo and Instagram and YouTube. We've been able to crawl all the way back to the very beginning of the usage of that platform. So we're fairly confident that we've captured almost everything. Unless the content creator specifically went to delete something, we feel that we've gotten everything that there is to get out there. News feeds, absolutely not. We've lost so much of this. And because it is absolutely directed news articles, there's a lot of value in this. And so we're actually just using Microsoft Outlook to subscribe to these RSS feeds, and it automatically downloads them and puts them into our mailboxes so that we can use Mbox or whatever email archiving strategy you're using to be able to grab all of these out of a mailbox as opposed to grabbing the original XML. As you can see, we subscribe to a lot of RSS feeds. It turns out that at the Ledge, every committee has an RSS feed set up for it. Doesn't mean they've ever used it. We set this up about 4 or 5 months ago, and you can see in the middle there's a big block of city county that have a lot of RSS feeds that haven't published anything in the last 6 months. You can look at Business Development and Support Division of DCCA, and you can see that we have 578 pieces that have been pushed out over the last 4 or 5 months. Which sounds really impressive until I think there was some type of an error, because as you can see in the middle column, as I pulled it up, we have the same news feed repeated over and over again. We're getting each news feed 20 different times. So we'll have to investigate that, because they didn't post this 20 times, it's just showing up 20 times. So it's not really 578, but they do post a lot. You can see Governor Ige has 189 news pieces that he pushed out. Very valuable, hard to get anywhere else. So this is a great low-hanging fruit that I think we can grab. And when you look at them and go to print them, which you can also automate as part of a Microsoft workflow, you can see you get what looks like a formatted news release. And so there's a lot of beautiful information there that we could capture and preserve and make keyword searchable. So we have very high hopes about being able to do that. And I'm repeating myself on that. So that's what we're doing, kind of in a nutshell. And the next steps that we have to do is, we're going to continue to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. We've downloaded 500,000 photographs, and we're with Vimeo and YouTube, we're pushing 5,000 video files. So that's great, but it's not publicly accessible yet. So over the next 2 months, we're really going to be focusing on bringing those into our digital archives so that we can have both public access as well as our preservation component to these social media pieces, so that now agencies can use social media platforms to communicate with their stakeholders. They can use it in their normal and ordinary course of business, knowing that if we've identified that social media site, if we know about that social media site, we're going to be taking the responsibility for preserving that piece in perpetuity. We really, really, really need to crack the Facebook API issue, because by far that is the most frequently utilized social media piece of any of the other platforms. Almost everybody who has a social media site of some kind is using Facebook. They may also be posting the same as the State Archives does. We post concurrently to Facebook and Instagram. And interestingly enough, for our type of social media posts, we have 3 times the number of followers on Instagram as we do Facebook. But we like the capabilities of Facebook far more than Instagram. So we're going to continue to look in that. We've got to crack that nut sometime in the next couple of months so that we can start to archive Facebook sites as well. And then we really need to try and figure out, is there a way that we can automate this process more? We're doing a semi-annual capture every 6 months. We go site by site. We click it, we download it, we throw it into the big pool that we have in our mass storage. But can we do better? Is there some way that we can do command line scripting or something to say every 3 months, just click a button and it'll automatically go and download everything that's new? So we'll continue to look at that. And then lastly, we'll continue to look for opportunities. Is there some tool, either wholesale or secondarily, that we can use to capture comments? It really would be an interesting piece of the history to see how did the public react to some of these postings, not to preserve it as communication with the government, but from a societal perspective, what was their take on it? I think there's a lot of research value 50 or 100 years from now that can be captured if we can get that. But I will caution you again, our policy and our recommendation is, until you have the capability of capturing those comments, don't engage in discussions in social media. It's really a lose-lose situation, because if somebody's grumbling, somebody's unhappy, you don't want to get into a flame war. You don't want to incite the trolls and have them come out, because then it all just devolves from there. So once a month, we'll remind people on our social media platforms that we do not comment. If you want to contact us, if you have questions, comments, or criticisms, here's the appropriate channels to do it. So take that for what it's worth and integrate it into your own. So in summation, yes, social media archiving can be done. And it's not going to cost you a whole lot of money. The tools that I've shown you cost a grand total of $70 for all of them. It's not the dollars, it's the staff time. It does take quite a bit, particularly for the first crawl, because you're going back to the very beginning of social media. So it's going to be huge. There's a lot of stuff to get. But once you get all that backlog done, the maintenance moving forward isn't as onerous. It's not very difficult. I'm asking my staff to do it as they're on reference desk. There are times when we just don't have any researchers in. That's a perfect time. Here's your sites you're responsible for. Go ahead and crawl them, download it, add it to the pool, and we'll continue to move on. So it is achievable. And I think it's important that we incorporate this into our institutions. So that's what I had to share with you today. I've got 20 minutes before a hard stop on my part, so I'm willing to hang and answer any questions you may have about anything I covered, anything I didn't cover, any questions you have. You let me have it.
Okay, Adam, we have a few questions. The first one you already answered, so I'm going to skip that one.
Okay.
Second one is, does it capture deleted tweets? What happens to deleted postings?
It does not capture deleted tweets, and that's because it does not know they exist, which is another reason why it's important that we capture this now. The importance of archives is we protect the records. And part of that responsibility is to protect those records from outside influences, be they environmental or political. Particularly as you have change of administrations, that is a very critical time. That anytime there's a leadership change, it's a very real possibility that the predecessors get wiped out. So the onus is on us to download these things more frequently and not rely upon the host platform to preserve those for us.
Okay, thanks. Let me go over the next question. This was a long question. Okay. The software for Instagram sounds like it would capture photos that were later deleted, but the Flickr Bulker program might not, unless someone checks frequently. Yes? No?
Well, I think they all function the same. The 4K histogram does, because it does not have manual intervention, that it will automatically, if you pull it up every day, crawl every day. So it's just a question of the staff time to liability aspect on how frequently you need to crawl. I actually only open 4K histogram once a quarter, because it's very intensive. It stores a lot of stuff. So I have to make sure that I have the resources available, and I'm not going to be using that computer so that it can get clogged up just to do that task. But yes, absolutely, that is one of the critical aspects of why it is important to actively archive your social media, because whether by accident or by deliberate act, we cannot lose these social media posts, because there may be some legal liability regarding that. And the example that I use in my class had to do with one of the cities on the continental US issuing an advisory that the water was safe to drink, when in actuality the health department had realized that it was not safe to drink. But the mayor's office had sent out the okay, and so there was timestamps and what was going on. And when you get in those type of he said, she said type of scenarios, having that in an independent custodian's control is very, very important. So it's not just all happy. There are real legal liability issues surrounding social media because of how widespread and how quickly we can get the message out using these platforms.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, let me go through a couple other questions. Let me just scroll down. Do you find that these tools are better for research than using web archiving tools such as Archive-It?
Well, Archive-It is a very similar tool. Archive-It is really the Internet Archives, and so they're following the same process using their tools. And so the question is whose repository do you want to be searching, and how much do you trust the veracity of their searches? I know Internet Archive, for instance, the Wayback Machine and some of these other tools, when they're hosting it, their storage repositories are so large that they occasionally have subsections of their storage which is not available. And that means that anything that's stored on there is not available. So it's a visibility perspective as well. So it's who do you want to search it? I don't trust third-party tools because I have some of the legal responsibility of preserving the records of permanent value. That's our legislative mandate. So I'm not going to farm that legislative mandate out to anybody else, because ultimately the buck stops here. So I want to know how, why, and what the backup is being done on this data so that it will continue to be accessible into the future.
Okay, Adam, next question. For clarification, State Archives is automatically archiving each department's social media accounts. Is the department not responsible for archiving them?
So let me clarify that. The State Archives is manually, not automatically, manually crawling known social media sites because we don't trust the platforms to do it. The responsibility starts with the departments. That is their responsibility until there is a formal handoff to the state archives, which we currently don't really have. But since we know that the departments themselves do not really have the capability of archiving these social media posts, we are being very proactive in researching and exploring this issue. Now that we've settled, once we get Facebook really under wraps, we'll be much more formal about this to send out notifications to the department saying we are targeting these sites, so you know we're doing this. The onus is no longer on you, and the legal responsibility is not on you, but only for these known sites. If there's others you're using, you have to let us know, because we don't know what you're using. So we haven't had that formal handoff yet, but I'm hoping that we can finalize this and validate all of the tools to the point where we're comfortable taking that formal responsibility.
Okay, Adam, you have time for a few more questions? There's quite a few left.
Yes, I've got 15 more minutes.
Woohoo. Okay, so next one. We archive our social media. How do we view it or search through it?
So that would depend on what do you mean by archiving. I would hope that meets my definition of preserving machine readable records from loss, alteration, deterioration, and technological obsolescence in a platform independent from that which produced it. So what that means then is in a platform independent from that which produced it. Just downloading it does not really make it usable. It does not make it searchable. So it's really up to you, depending on how and what format you're archiving it and how you make that accessible. Without seeing the platform, I don't have an answer for you other than you're going to have to reconstitute those records in some way. As you've seen from all of our tools, the object is separate from the metadata, and so you have to reassociate that together somehow into a searchable format. If you're really low tech, you start with that Excel spreadsheet and say that is where we start. Find what it is you're looking for, and then go look for the image or the video that's associated with it.
Let's change that question around, Adam. How is the state archives planning to allow searchability through these records?
We are loading everything up into our digital archives, which is at digitalarchives.hawaii.gov. Each of these records creators will have a record group of their own. And within that record group will be a record series called Public Relation Files. And under Public Relation Files will be a subseries called Social Media. And within social media will be each of the different platforms. And so we will be reconstituting all of these records using the Excel metadata, and the original digital object that was posted with it will be individually listed and posted under that sub-series, so that you can either directly drill down, I want to see what the governor's office or the Department of Health posted on Twitter between this date and this date, or I want to search Department of Health for any time that they mention COVID, or I want to search it all across the platform anytime COVID's mentioned. So it'll provide quite a bit of functionality for searching at a very high level or at a very granular level.
Okay, next question. Do you recommend official government pages not to allow comments?
If we could, I would definitely block comments. What we've seen is that's not in the best interest of these commercial third parties. They like the comments because, as we've seen potentially coming out from the whistleblower at Facebook, when people are angry, they tend to use the social media platforms more. So we haven't seen tools that can really block commenting. Which is unfortunate, because we definitely would like to do that so that it is just a one-way communication. Here's what's new, enjoy, do with it as you will. Fortunately, in the 2 years that we've been running Facebook and Instagram, we haven't had too many trolls posting vile things. But your mileage may vary depending on how popular your institution is at any given time with any given decision. But again, given the option, I absolutely would not allow commenting if that was possible.
Okay, so next question, Adam. Is there currently a deadline or a goal for having the agency's social media fully archived?
The answer to that is no, because we don't have the tools that we need yet. We are grabbing everything we can now for fear of if we don't grab it now, we will not have it later. So as we continue to refine our tool suite, we at least know that we have a good baseline foundation of archival objects that we can bring in. As I said, we're hoping over the next 2 months to crack that Facebook API issue, that it shows a lot of promise, but we don't know for a fact that it's going to work yet. Once we know that, we'll feel fairly comfortable that we can capture the vast majority of the social media platforms in the state. At that point, we will formalize our strategy moving forward, because we'll have the knowledge, the experience to look back on having done this 3 or 4 cycles on what works, what doesn't, what does it take to achieve this at a high success level. Again, that being said, there's still some shortcomings. We can't capture comments, and depending on the agency, my take with the PIOs, public information officers of most of the executive level entities, they do engage in conversations, which is problematic because I don't have the ability to preserve that information yet. So that is one possible liability vector that I can't solve yet. So we will continue to work on it. I will continue to read all of the academic publications that come out in this space, so that we can continue to refine, and hopefully next year we can absolutely lock this down and have a formal program on this.
Okay, one more. Does the state have open records or sunshine laws about deleting posts or regulating friends only or blocking users?
That I would suggest that you contact the Office of Information Practices on. My take on it is we have very clear definitional issues of what a record is and what that means. And as far as deleting, that's extraordinarily problematic. If it's a permanent record, you're not supposed to delete it. Whether or not you can, quote, get caught doing it is another issue, because it's so difficult to trace down. But my take on it is deletion of permanent records is not something that is allowed under the law. As far as blocking people, I think the Supreme Court of the U.S. has already definitively ruled on whether or not government employees have the right to block individuals from social media platforms. And so I would assume that that would also extend down at the state level, which means no, you cannot. When you put that out there, that is a public record, and the public has a right to access governmental records. So yeah, don't delete and don't block. If you don't like it, don't post it. If you post things and you're finding out you're having to pull it back, maybe you need a better vetting process the first time around. Just don't throw stuff up there. We need to take social media seriously as a record. It's not just something fun and frivolous. These have real serious legal and historical impact. So, give them the respect that they deserve.
Okay, next question. Speaking of leadership changes, what if an account was not created officially by the department? In other words, leaders or staff who create their own account for their work or office within the department. Do we have the authority or obligation to archive it?
The short answer to that is definitional. Let's go back to what the definition of a record is. That is any document, regardless of format, with fixed format and context, made or received in the usual and ordinary course of a practical activity. So whether or not it has been formally sanctioned at the highest levels, if a employee is using it as part of the conduct of their business, then yes, it is a record, and yes, we have an obligation to preserve it. So, that's one of those areas, like email, they just don't take quite as seriously as they should. So if it deals with the business of the organization, whether or not it's formally sanctioned, it is a governmental record.
Okay, next one. What was the name of the Twitter program that you're using to archive Twitter?
I believe it's called Twitter Media Downloader.
Got it. Thanks. Is archiving of social media required of public, military social media sites as well as appointed military officials?
If they're military, that's federal. That's unless they're the National Guard. So really, my recommendation is you need to talk to whoever your departmental records officer is and see what the implications are for you. If it's National Guard, then I would say yes, as a state level military organization, you fall under state laws, and yes, that needs to be archived.
Are there any permissions needed to do these crawls? If we wanted to archive a community group's social media, for example, can we use these tools? What are the privacy or permission controls?
So the short answer is anything that is put on a social media platform, by and large, is publicly accessible. That being said, Facebook, for instance, has their communities where you have to, be allowed in. But as long as you have access to it on a social media platform, you can download it. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, because there are copyright considerations to take into account. That these organizations are publishing things, they still retain the copyright to any of the images or the text posted there. So it's always best to clear it with them. Operating within a government sphere makes it much easier because the government, everything we produce is open. So we don't have to ask permission to capture governmental websites. I've got 3 more minutes.
I think this is our final question. Oh, no, maybe not.
Oh!
Almost final. Will you be listing the tools you mentioned someplace so we could do further research?
Yes, Gina will be posting this recording, and so I would encourage you to watch it again, and you can conduct your research from there.
All right. I think this is the final question, Adam. I'm just going to publish it now. Give me a sec. And then go back to it. All right. If an administrator used Teams as a platform to record internal departmental staff trainings, is this public record and does it need to be archived? Can it be deleted?
The first question, is it a public record? The answer is absolutely yes, which is why we always go back to the definition. Was it created or received as part of their governmental function? And if the answer is yes, it is a record. So now it becomes an issue of what is the retention on that record? Internal meetings is very different than meetings with the public or things that are public facing. So it doesn't need to be archived, but it does need to be kept for an explicit period of time because of the legal framework that the state operates in. And so again, I would recommend you talk to your departmental records officer to see what retention schedule specifically that type of meeting falls into. Because again, if it's a meeting with your public, that's very different. That if you're having public meetings on Teams, those are permanent records.
All right. I think that's it, Adam. Thanks everyone for coming. And thank you, Adam, for providing us with a very interesting presentation.
It's a
Thanks,
pleasure.
everyone.
Aloha.
Bye.
Thanks, Gina.